Today I'm going to show you a Western action movie titled Django Unchained. Be ready for spoilers ahead. The year is 1858 in Texas, America, a period where all the black people in southern states were slaves. On a cold night, slave traders transport slaves to Mississippi. The white masters are on horseback while the slaves are walking barefoot and shivering as they only have dirty rugs covering their bodies. In the darkness they come across a well-dressed, middle-aged white bounty hunter who is disguised as a dentist. King Schultz is looking for a slave from a Karakani plantation to help identify a band of wanted fugitives known as the Brittles brothers. This slave happens to be Django. The bounty hunter wanted to buy Django from the slavers, but instead they threatened him by pointing a gun at him. The bounty hunter does not take this lightly, shooting one brother on the head and killing the horse of the other, causing the dead horse to crush his leg, leaving him screaming in pain. Just like that, the bounty hunter frees the remaining slaves but keeps Django with him. Django and Schultz pass through a white-only town, where the town folk stop to stare in disbelief at the sight of a black man on a horse. The two enter the saloon despite the fact that Django is forbidden from doing so, and when Schultz insists on being served, the barkeeper runs screaming for help from the sheriff. The sheriff enters the saloon with his shotgun in hand and tells Schultz and Django to come outside, and as the two step forward, Schultz shoots the sheriff in the stomach, killing him. As the townfolk run for their lives, Schultz looks up and tells the bartender that now is the time to fetch the marshal. The bartender runs off as Schultz and Django walk back into the saloon to wait. The town people, headed by the marshal, arrive with his deputies aiming their rifles at the front door of the saloon, ready to shoot the two on sight. Schultz exits with his hands raised over his head and a paper in his hand. He announces to the marshal and the assembled townsfolk that the dead man was an outlaw who went by the name of Bill Sharp. He is a wanted cattle rustler with a $200 bounty on his head. Schultz shows the marshal an official document from a judge that charges him with finding and bringing Bill Sharp back to the proper jurisdiction, dead or alive. He then suggests that the marshal pay him the $200 fee. While camping, Django is hit with a painful flashback and reveals that he is planning to buy the freedom of his lover. It turns out the two had tried to escape, but they were caught by the Brittles brothers, and as punishment, they were branded on their cheeks as runaway slaves and sold separately, which meant they would never see each other again. Django and Schultz arrive at the plantation where they suspect the Brittles brothers reside. Schultz pretends to tell the owner that he's looking to buy one of his slaves for an exorbitant price. As the property owner takes Schultz to show him his inventory, he instructs one of the female slaves to show Django around. Django used this opportunity to confirm the whereabouts of the Brittles. The brothers were indeed present on this plantation. As soon as Django saw them, a flashback of the three brothers torturing his lover by whipping her flooded his mind. Django finds that Big John is in the middle of whipping a slave for breaking the eggs, and he has done this to his wife before. Django kills one of the brothers and whips the other, taking his sweet revenge before killing him. Just as Schultz comes racing in, Django tells Schultz that Ellis is already galloping away across the cotton field. From a distance, Schultz snipes Ellis, causing blood to spray the cotton flowers as he falls off his horse. Though the plantation owner is incensed when he arrives, he is forced to let them go once Schultz explains that they are legally authorized to kill and collect these men. Schultz and Django pack up quickly and leave. As expected, the white folks didn't take a black person killing a white man lightly. All the white residents put on Klan outfits in pursuit of the two. Django and Schultz anticipated all this by setting up a trap by placing dynamite in the cart. Their plan worked perfectly. As soon as the Klan members surrounded the cart, it blew up, killing all of them. The bounty hunter promised to help Django find his wife if he would work with him over the winter collecting bounty. Schultz is also impressed with Django's lover, Brumhilde, and her ability to speak German. Django agrees to Schultz's proposal, and later he trains Django to not only be an expert with a gun but also how to read and present himself in public. Later, Django and Schultz perch themselves on a hill overlooking a small farm, where Django hesitates to kill a man who is working on the farm and has a son. But Schultz explains that before the man owned this farm and started a family, he murdered several people while robbing stagecoaches, and that he has a $7,000 bounty on his head. Hearing this, Django shoots and kills the man in front of his son. Once winter passes, the two head back to the south in search of Brumhilde. They both discover that she was sold to a man named Calvin Candy, the owner of a plantation in Mississippi known as Candyland. Candy is famous for breeding Mandingo slaves who are bred to fight each other to the death for their owner's amusement. Schultz will portray himself as a wealthy European who wants to buy one of Candy's Mandingos to fight in Europe, and that Django is his business partner and talent evaluator. Django and Schultz arrive at Candy's club where they witness a Mandingo fight. The fight is brutal and fatal, with the winner gouging out the loser's eyes. Schultz asks the Mandingo owner for an audience. Django introduces himself, but Candy is boorish, arrogant, and ignorant despite his wealth and high upbringing. Django also becomes incredibly offensive to Candy and his guests, but Calvin finds Django's rude and defensive behavior amusing as well as Schultz's charming. Schultz and Django state that they are willing to pay an exorbitant $12,000 for one of Candy's best mandingos. The amount is sky high for Calvin to refuse, so they arrange to return with him to his plantation. The group travels in a convoy and meets one of Candy's slaves chased up a tree by some of Candy's trash workmen and their vicious hounds. It turns out the slave is a mandingo who was caught running away from the plantation. Candy convinces the slave to come down from the tree, where he pleads that he can't handle any other fights despite having won 3 in a row. Candy asserts that his slaves must win at least 5 matches before they can retire from fighting, allowing him to recoup his $500 investment, and that the slave must be killed. Schultz suddenly offers to pay Candy $500 to spare the slave's life, but Django, realizing such odd behavior would blow their cover, loudly declares that the slave isn't worth a single penny. Thus Candy has the hounds tear the slave apart while everyone watches. A little later they all arrive at Candyland and meet Calvin's widowed older sister, Lara, and his loyal 76-year-old house slave and foreman trustee Stephen. It is clear that Stephen is appalled that Django is free and riding on a horse into the plantation along with his master and will be allowed to stay in Candy's house. Django also takes an instant dislike for Stephen. Stephen informs Candy that while he was gone, Broomhilda also attempted to escape and is now locked in the hot metal box in the field. Schultz says he wants to meet Broomhilda because he heard stories about her German-speaking abilities. Candy, wanting to please his guest, orders Broomhilda to be cleaned up and sent to Schultz's room. Though Django is enraged at seeing his wife dragged from the hotbox, he checks his temper and starts to plan how he will take her from there. Broomhilda is brought to Schultz's room where Django is waiting. The wife was so surprised to see Django that she fainted. That evening at the table, Broomhilda served Candy and his many guests. Stephen noticed some affection between Django and Broomhilda, then uncovered Django's plan to his master, Calvin, who became very angry and returned to the dining room, revealing that he knows that they want Broomhilda, and unless they immediately pay him $12,000 for her, he will kill her with a ball-peen hammer in front of them. Schultz immediately agrees to these terms and pays the $12,000, and Candy has his lawyer begin drawing up the papers transferring ownership of Broomhilda to Schultz. Candy gloats about his victory and intelligence, and Schultz begins to think about the slave's brutal death. Candy signs the papers and attempts to humiliate Schultz as they depart, stating that he will not allow the travelers to leave his property with the girl unless Schultz shakes his hand, which is a Mississippi and Southern tradition. This is more than Schultz can take, and as he stretches out his hand to shake Candy's palm, he fires and shoots him to death. As Stephen screams for help, Schultz apologizes to Django for being unable to resist temptation, and then Candy's bodyguard fires his shotgun and kills him. The chaos begins as Django grabs the distracted bodyguard's revolver and shoots him. One cowboy runs screaming for help but is shot multiple times as he tries to enter the foyer. The shootout ensues as Django trades fire with numerous white ranchers, killing a lot of them. Django tried his best, but was overwhelmed and forced to surrender when Stephen and his associate captured Broomhilda, threatening to kill her unless Django agreed to Stephen's terms. Django was beaten, clothes were removed, muzzled like a dog and hanged upside down until morning. Stephen and his slave master debated how to torture Django as death was too small for his crime. Finally they decided to give him away to LaQuint Dickey Mining Company. Slaves in this place have it worse. They are overworked and underfed all day, swinging a slag hummers, turning big rocks into small rocks. One word from him, the tongue would be cut. He would work until his back gave up, then they would hit his head and throw him away, and that would be the story of Django. En route to the mining company, Django is able to get the attention of the transporters. He tells them that he is a bounty hunter, not a slave, and that he was tracking a man worth $7,000 before his capture. Django was convincing enough to let the transporters stupidly cut him loose. Once Django was handed a gun, he killed the 3 white men and rode back to Candyland plantation for his wife. During this time Calvin Candy's funeral was taking place, hence all distracted. Django managed to enter the plantation and discovered Schultz's lifeless body in a stable, with Broomhilda's freedom papers still on him. Django said goodbye to his friend and reunited with his wife. Candy's family and friends returned from his funeral, but Django is there, waiting at the top of the grand staircase, and was not forgiving. He killed all the white folks before blowing up the house with old man Stephen still inside. Django meets his wife, who waits for him with 2 horses outside the estate, then both ride off into the night to face whatever destiny awaits them. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this.